sir.
Hey, whose kid is that?
She's my daughter. Is there a problem?
Your daughter. She doesn't look like yours.
Excuse me?
I got a call. Someone in this neighborhood was concerned. I can see
You're
why.
telling me someone called the cops on a father sitting with his daughter in a park?
I'm gonna need you to calm down and show me some ID. You don't exactly
Don't belong
in this area.
I did 3 tours overseas. I'm a combat veteran, and your question...
A black man is sitting on a park bench. A white little girl is laughing and running toward him with her arms open wide. And a police officer is already reaching for his handcuffs. That is where this story begins. And what happens next is something nobody in that park will ever forget. Riverside Park on a Sunday afternoon has its own kind of rhythm. Kids on the grass, families at the picnic tables, the smell of popcorn drifting over from the cart near the east entrance, old couples walking slow on purpose, like they have decided time can wait for them now, dogs pulling on leashes, pigeons unbothered by everything. It is the kind of place where nothing bad is supposed to happen, where the biggest argument is usually about who gets the last bench in the shade. Marcus Thorne knew this park the way you know a place you have chosen on purpose. He had not ended up here by accident. He had picked this park, this bench, this exact spot by the fountain, because 2 years ago, when everything in his life was heavy and sharp and hard to carry, this was the place that made his daughter smile without trying. And when Lily smiled, the weight lifted. Simple as that. She was 6 years old now, running in circles near the fountain the way she always did, narrating everything she saw out loud like a nature documentary. There's a duck. He is eating something. I think it is bread. Daddy, should we have brought bread? Marcus had told her 3 times already that yes, next Sunday they would bring bread. She had already forgotten and was now negotiating with a pigeon, using a small stick and a level of confidence that made the older man on the nearby bench laugh out loud. Marcus watched her and felt the particular kind of peace that does not ask for anything. Just sits there, warm and quiet. He had a coffee going cold in his hand. His jacket was folded on the bench beside him. His phone was face down. Whatever the rest of the world was doing, it could wait until Lily was done with her pigeon diplomacy. He had been a soldier. 2 full tours overseas in places where the air itself felt hostile. He had come back home carrying things that do not show up in any scan or report, things that live behind the eyes and wake you up at 3 in the morning for no reason you can name. He had done the work to come back from that, slowly and quietly and without asking anyone for applause. He had rebuilt himself the way you rebuild anything, one piece at a time, on the days when you felt like it, and especially on the days when you did not. And then Renee got sick, his younger sister, the one who had sent him care packages when he was overseas with handwritten notes that always ended the same way. Come home safe. I need someone to argue with. She had been sick for 2 years before the end came. And when it came, she left behind a little girl with no father in the picture, no close family nearby, and a laugh that sounded so much like Renee's that the first time Marcus heard it, he had to walk out of the room and stand in the hallway for a moment just to breathe. He did not think twice about what came next. He started the foster process before the month was out, sat through every home inspection and interview and court date in a suit. He had pressed himself because he wanted them to see that he was serious. He was always serious about the things that mattered, and nothing had ever mattered more than this. The adoption finalized on a Tuesday morning. He drove straight to Riverside Park and pushed Lily on the swings until her laughing turned into the hiccup kind, and then he pushed her some more. That was 2 years ago. They had been coming back every single Sunday since. The vendor near the East Path knew his order before he reached the cart. The retired teacher who walked her golden retriever every week knew Lily by name and always had a treat in her pocket for both of them. The older couple near the rose garden, the ones who sat so close together they looked like one person from a distance, had once told Marcus that watching him with Lily was the best part of their Sunday. He had not known what to say to that. He had just nodded and meant it. This was not a place where Marcus Thorne was a stranger. This was his park, his Sunday, his daughter running back toward him right now, with both arms out, and something extremely urgent to report about the duck situation near the far side of the fountain. He stood up from the bench to catch her. That is when Officer Dale Pruitt turned the corner on his patrol route and saw them. And something shifted behind Pruitt's eyes. Not curiosity, not concern, something already decided. He looked at Marcus. He looked at Lily. He looked at the gap between what he expected to see and what he was seeing. And without a single question, without one word to anyone nearby, without checking with the vendor 10 steps away who could have told him everything he needed to know in 30 seconds. Pruitt started walking toward them with the posture of a man who had already made up his mind. Marcus saw him coming. He had been in enough situations to read a room before it announced itself. He set Lily down gently, kept one hand on her shoulder, and waited. What happened in the next 4 minutes would be recorded on 7 different phones, witnessed by over 20 people, and would eventually cost the city of Crestfield more money than Officer Dale Pruitt would earn in 100 lifetimes. But right now, in this moment, it was just a father standing in front of his daughter, and an officer who had already stopped seeing either one of them clearly. Nobody called the police that afternoon. Let that sit for a second. Not one person in that park picked up their phone and dialed. No report of crime. No description of a disturbance. No child in danger. No argument. No reason on paper for any officer to approach anyone. Dale Pruitt was on a routine patrol. He saw what he saw. He decided what he decided. And he acted on it before a single fact had been established. That is the part that matters. That is the part that never quite made it into Pruitt's incident report. Marcus stood still as Pruitt approached. He was good at stillness. The military had done that. When you have been in situations where moving the wrong way at the wrong moment costs everything, you learn to be completely calm on the outside, even when every instinct is firing at once. He kept his hand resting lightly on Lily's shoulder. He kept his face open and his voice ready. Pruitt stopped a few feet away and looked at Lily first. Not at Marcus. At Lily. The way someone looks at something they're trying to explain to themselves. Is this man bothering you? Lily looked up at Pruitt the way children look at adults who have just said something confusing. She tilted her head. That is my daddy, she said like it was the most obvious fact in the world. Because to her it was. Pruitt did not smile. He did not soften. He looked at Marcus. Sir, I'm going to need you to step away from the child. Marcus did not move. His voice came out even and clear. That is my daughter. Her name is Lily. We come here every Sunday. I am happy to show you my identification and her adoption paperwork right now. I did not ask about paperwork. I asked you to step away. Marcus kept his eyes on Pruitt. I am not going to step away from my 6-year-old daughter in a public park. That is not something I am going to do. If you have a specific concern, I am glad to address it. What is the concern? Pruitt's jaw tightened. Someone nearby had already pulled out a phone. Then someone else. The vendor down the path had stopped pretending to arrange his cart and was watching directly now. The retired teacher with the golden retriever had stopped walking. The dog sat down like it understood that this was a moment to be still. There was a complaint, Pruitt said. Marcus paused. What was the complaint? Pruitt did not answer. Because there was no complaint. There was never a complaint. The park's activity log for that entire afternoon would later show 0 calls, 0 reports, 0 anything connected to that bench or that fountain or that man and his daughter feeding ducks on a Sunday. But Marcus did not know that yet. What he knew was that the officer in front of him could not answer a simple question, and that told him something important about what was actually happening here. He reached slowly into his jacket pocket, moving deliberately so every motion was visible, and held out his phone with Lily's adoption certificate pulled up on the screen. He did not hand it over. He held it where Pruitt could see it clearly without either of them having to move closer to each other. His name on the document. Lily's name. The court's seal. The date. Everything a person would need to see in order to understand the situation in under 10 seconds. Pruitt glanced at the screen. Then he looked away. That moment right there. That glance and look away. 7 phones caught it. And it would become one of the most replayed seconds in the entire video because it showed something that no incident report would ever be able to explain. Stand up, Pruitt said. I need you to come with me for questioning. Marcus stood slowly, both hands visible. He was careful about that. He had spent years being careful about that. He asked Pruitt one more time, calm and clear, to state what law he believed had been broken. Pruitt stepped forward. And then he did something that nobody standing in that park could quite believe even as they were watching it happen. He reached out and struck Marcus across the back of the head. Not a blow that knocked him forward. A sharp, open-handed strike to the back of the skull. The kind of thing that is not about force. It is about something else entirely. It is about making someone feel small. It is about making clear who has the power to touch and who has to stand there and take it. Lily was at the fountain's edge when it happened. She spun around at the sound. She stood frozen for one full second, her small face trying to process what her eyes were telling her. Then she ran, not away, toward him. She grabbed Marcus by the arm with both hands and pressed herself against his side and said, "Daddy," in a voice so small and so certain at the same time that 3 people nearby had to look away. Marcus did not react to the strike the way Pruitt may have expected. He did not stumble. He did not raise his hands. He stood completely still, looked down at his daughter, and said in the quietest possible voice, "It is all right, Bug. Stand right here with me. Do not move." Then he raised his eyes to Pruitt. And everyone in that park who was watching said later that what they saw on Marcus Thorne's face in that moment was not anger. It was not fear. It was something much harder to describe. It was the face of a man who had already survived things that would have finished most people. A man who had come home from places where genuine danger was everywhere and rebuilt his life piece by piece and stood here on this grass every Sunday for 2 years with his daughter and never once asked anyone for anything except to be left in peace. And he looked at Officer Dale Pruitt, and he said it loud enough for every single person in that park to hear. "My name is Marcus Thorne. I am a veteran of the United States Army. I served 2 tours. This is my daughter. She is legally adopted, and her name is Lily Thorne. You have struck me without cause in front of my child, and there is not one person standing in this park right now who did not see exactly what you just did." He looked around slowly, at the phones, at the faces, at the vendor and the teacher and the older couple near the rose garden who had risen from their bench and were standing close together, watching with expressions that had gone from disbelief to something that looked a great deal like fury. Every single one of them is a witness. Pruitt reached for his handcuffs, and somewhere across the park, a woman who had been watching from the moment Pruitt first approached picked up her phone and called not 911, but the number she had saved in her contacts 3 months earlier after attending a community meeting about exactly this kind of situation. The number for Sergeant Yvonne Castillo. Direct line. She told Castillo everything in under a minute, and Castillo was already in her car before the call ended. Sergeant Yvonne Castillo had seen a lot in her 20 years on the force. She had talked people off ledges. She had delivered news that broke families in half. She had stood in rooms where the air itself felt like it was holding its breath. But when she pulled up to the east entrance of Riverside Park and stepped out of her car, what she felt was something different, something that sat low and heavy in her chest before she even reached the gate. She could hear it before she saw it. Not shouting, not chaos, something quieter than that. The particular silence of a crowd that has witnessed something it cannot unhear. She walked through the entrance, and the scene arranged itself in front of her one piece at a time. Pruitt standing near the fountain with his shoulders set in the rigid way of a man trying to hold a story together. Marcus Thorne on the grass a few feet away, hands cuffed in front of him, sitting straight-backed and completely still. And Lily, pressed against his side with both arms wrapped around his arm, her face turned into his sleeve, not crying anymore, but holding on the way a child holds on when letting go feels impossible. Castillo had been told she was responding to a resisting suspect. What she was looking at was a father and his daughter sitting on the ground together, and 8 people standing in a loose half circle who all turned to look at her the moment she arrived with expressions that said the same thing without a single word. You need to hear what actually happened here. She held up one hand toward the crowd, not dismissive, just steady, and walked to Pruitt first. She kept her voice low. "Walk me through it." Pruitt walked her through it. His version. The version where there had been a complaint, where Marcus had been uncooperative, where the situation had escalated because of choices Marcus made. He used the kind of language that fills incident reports. Words that sound official and leave out the parts that matter. Castillo listened to all of it without interrupting. That was something she had learned early. You let people finish. You let them place every brick of their version of events before you start asking where the foundation is. Then she turned and walked to Marcus. She crouched down, so she was at his level, and she looked at him directly. Not the way Pruitt had looked at him. Not with anything already decided behind her eyes. She looked at him the way you look at a person you are actually trying to understand. Sir, my name is Sergeant Castillo. I want to hear your account. Take whatever time you need. Marcus looked at her for a moment, reading her the way he had learned to read people in places where reading people correctly was the difference between walking away and not walking away. Then he spoke, not fast, not emotional, just clear and sequential, the way someone speaks when they have nothing to hide and have been trained to report facts without decoration. He told her everything from the moment Pruitt appeared. The question directed at Lily before a single word to him. The order to step away from his own child. The adoption documents offered and ignored. The question about what law had been broken, asked twice, never answered. And then what happened next? He did not dramatize it. He said it the same way he might report a weather condition. Officer Pruitt struck me across the back of the head with an open hand. My daughter witnessed it. Several members of the public witnessed it. I have reason to believe it was recorded on multiple devices. Castillo kept her face steady. She asked one question. Did you at any point move toward Officer Pruitt in a threatening manner or make physical contact with him? Marcus looked at her without blinking. No. She stood up. She looked across the half circle of bystanders and asked, clearly and professionally, whether anyone had recorded the interaction. 5 hands went up before she finished the sentence. A woman near the rose garden path stepped forward without being asked and said she had footage from before Pruitt even reached the bench. Another man said he had everything from the moment Pruitt told Marcus to step away. A teenager sitting on a bike near the fountain said the part everyone needed to see was at the 2-minute mark on his video, and he was not deleting a single second of it. Castillo asked them each for their contact information. They gave it without hesitation. Then she did something that nobody present expected. She walked back to Pruitt, stood close enough that only he could hear her clearly, and said in a voice made entirely of control, "Is there anything you want to add to your account before I start reviewing footage?" Pruitt said no. Castillo nodded once. Then she walked back to Marcus, crouched back down, and removed the handcuffs herself. She did not make a speech about it. She did not perform a moment. She just took them off and said, quietly, "I'm sorry this happened to you and your daughter today." Marcus stood. He rolled his wrists once without looking at them. Then he reached down and picked Lily up off the ground, and she wrapped her arms around his neck and pressed her forehead against his jaw, and he held her there in the middle of that park with one hand spread wide across her back. The crowd that had been watching let out a collective breath. The retired teacher had her hand pressed over her mouth. The vendor had stopped pretending to do anything at all. The older couple near the rose garden were standing hand in hand, watching with the kind of expression that belongs to people who have lived long enough to recognize an injustice the moment it stands in front of them. Castillo turned to Pruitt and told him he was to return to the station immediately and submit to a full account before the end of his shift. She used his full name and his badge number when she said it. She did that on purpose. Pruitt left without a word. Marcus watched him go. He did not look relieved. He did not look victorious. He looked like a man who had just been asked to spend energy he should never have had to spend in a place that was supposed to be simple and good, on a day that was supposed to be about nothing more complicated than his daughter and some ducks and a cup of coffee going cold on a park bench. He looked at Castillo. His voice was quiet, but it landed on every person in earshot. "I want every badge number documented from today. I want your report filed before end of business. And I want it noted in that report that I provided identification and legal documentation before any escalation occurred." Castillo said she would handle it personally. Marcus shifted Lily to his other arm. She had gone still the way children go still when they're finally safe, heavy and soft like something that has been holding itself tight for too long and can finally let go. He pressed his chin to the top of her head for a moment. Then he looked back at Sergeant Castillo one last time. "I have a phone call to make." She nodded. She already knew what that meant. What she did not know yet, what none of them knew yet, was that those 7 phone recordings were already being texted between numbers, forwarded to inboxes, dropped into group chats and community pages and local news tip lines. And that by the time Marcus Thorne sat down in his car and dialed his attorney, the footage had already reached someone who watched the whole thing twice, picked up their own phone, and called a reporter they trusted. By sundown, the story was no longer just a story that happened in Riverside Park. It was everywhere, and it was moving fast. 22 million views in 4 days. Read that number again. 22 million people watched a handcuffed father sitting on the grass of a public park with his 6-year-old daughter holding onto his arm. 22 million people watched a police officer look directly at legal adoption documents on a phone screen and turn away. And then the part that made people stop scrolling and watch with their whole chest, the part that got clipped and shared and played on news programs in cities that had never heard of Crestfield before that week. The 2-minute mark, exactly where the teenager on the bike said it would be. The comment sections were not what usually fills comment sections. There was anger, yes, but there was also something heavier. People writing about their own fathers, their own Sundays, their own moments of standing somewhere ordinary and feeling the air shift in a way that told them the rules did not apply to them the same way they applied to everyone else standing in the same space. The video had cracked something open, and what poured out of it was real. The Crestfield Police Department released a statement Tuesday morning. It was 4 paragraphs long and contained the following actual information. Almost none. It used phrases like currently under review and committed to accountability, and we take all concerns seriously. It was the kind of statement that is written to make noise without saying anything. The kind that assumes people will accept official language as a substitute for actual answers. People did not accept it. By Wednesday, the police chief had been called to an emergency city council session. By Thursday, 2 council members had gone on record calling for Pruitt's immediate termination. By Friday, a federal civil rights organization had announced it was monitoring the situation and evaluating whether to file an independent complaint. And all of that happened before the personnel file came out. Because here is the part that made everything worse for the department. Pruitt had done this before. Not this exactly, but close enough. His file, which a city council member released to the press under public records law after the department refused a formal request, showed 3 prior incidents over 7 years. 3 separate encounters where Pruitt had approached black men in the presence of white children, 2 in parks, 1 outside a grocery store, and had filed reports describing suspicious behavior that, when reviewed against the actual accounts of the people involved, amounted to nothing more than existing in a space Pruitt had decided they did not belong in. All 3 had been reported to his supervising officers. All 3 had been reviewed and cleared internally. None of them had resulted in any action, any retraining, any note in his file that suggested the department saw a pattern forming. The department had known, or, at the very least, the department had been told, and it had looked at what it was told and decided that no action was required. That decision was now sitting in the middle of a federal civil rights case that had been filed 10 days after Lily held on her father's arm on the grass of Riverside Park. Marcus Thorne's attorney, a woman named Diane Okafor who had spent 15 years handling civil rights cases and had a reputation for being the kind of person you called when the situation was serious, filed against both Pruitt individually and the city of Crestfield as an institution. The charges covered unlawful use of force, false detention, racial discrimination, failure to supervise, and deliberate emotional distress inflicted on a minor child. She held a press conference on the steps of the courthouse and spoke for exactly 7 minutes. She did not raise her voice once. She did not need to. The facts she laid out in those 7 minutes were enough. Pruitt was terminated 4 weeks after the incident. The official findings cited unprovoked physical contact, a falsified incident report, and a demonstrated pattern of racially motivated conduct. He was 31 years old. The department did not defend him publicly. They cut him loose the way institutions cut people loose when keeping them becomes more expensive than losing them. The city's legal team spent 6 weeks reviewing the evidence. 12 videos, 23 witness statements, a personnel file full of ignored warnings, an incident report that contradicted the footage so directly that a first-year law student could have dismantled it in an afternoon, and a defendant who had served 2 tours overseas, adopted his late sister's daughter, and spent every Sunday for 2 years building a life in the same park where their officer had decided to treat him like a threat. They settled $7.1 million. They did not take it to trial because there was no version of a trial that ended well for them, and they knew it. Marcus did not celebrate. That was the thing people noticed about him throughout all of it. In the clip from outside the courthouse after the settlement was announced, he is holding Lily's hand, and she is wearing a yellow jacket and eating something completely unbothered while the cameras point at her father. A reporter asks Marcus how he feels. He is quiet for a long moment. Then he says, "I feel like my daughter should never have had to see what she saw that day. And no amount of money is the right answer to that. The right answer would have been for it not to happen. I'm going to make sure the part one control goes toward making sure it happens to fewer people." He established the Renee Thorne Foundation, named for his sister, within 2 months of the settlement. The foundation funds legal support for families targeted by racial profiling and provides free counseling services for children who have experienced distressing encounters with law enforcement. In its first year, it helped over 200 families across 4 states. Marcus returned to his position, quiet, focused, unchanged in the ways that mattered. He still pressed his shirts himself. He still showed up early. He still did the work without asking for acknowledgement. And on the first Sunday, after everything was finally, officially over, he drove to Riverside Park. He parked in his usual spot. He walked Lily through the east entrance. She ran ahead the way she always did, turned back to check he was coming, waved him forward like he needed the encouragement. He followed her past the vendor who raised his coffee cup in a quiet salute, past the retired teacher whose golden retriever tried to follow Lily toward the fountain, past the bench where the older couple sat close together and nodded at him with the kind of nod that carries a sentence inside it. He sat down. He let his coffee go cold. He watched his daughter negotiate with pigeons using a stick and a confidence that suggested she expected to win. He had come back because this was his park, his Sunday, his daughter, and he had not survived 2 tours in a courtroom and everything in between just to let one man's bad decision take a single ordinary Sunday away from him. Lily ran back across the grass toward him, arms out, something extremely urgent to report about a duck near the far side of the fountain. He stood up to catch her. If this story moved something in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Black fathers exist. Black veterans exist. Black love is real, and it is not suspicious, and it does not need to explain itself to anyone. What reforms would you demand from your city's police department right now? Drop them in the comments. And if you believe every parent deserves a peaceful afternoon with their child in a public park, subscribe. We will keep telling these stories until the people who need to hear them have no choice left but to listen.